Morning. That was a lot louder than 7:30 Mass this morning. My name is Steciw, and this morning I was hoping to share a bit of my faith journey with you all. I had a very fortunate childhood. I have wonderful parents, people of great faith, who loved me deeply. In fact, my childhood was amazing. I was very happy. I knew I was loved by God and by my parents. Pardon me. However, at a young age, something began to creep up in my life. I best describe them as lies. John's Gospel warns us of the one who does not hold on to the truth, for there is no truth in him. For he is a liar and the father of lies. Now, this is strong language, but unfortunately, in my own experience, I've come to see just how true these words can be. As I look back on my life, I see just how much I began to believe these lies and how devastating they were on my life. At a young age, I decided that I was not popular enough, and that I must not be good enough to be popular. The visible result was that I was cripplingly shy, because I was very sure that if I stepped out of my shell, I would be embarrassed. I can vividly remember an experience in 6th grade history class, where I had to give a presentation in front of class. This was before the days of PowerPoint and smartboards, and I was using an overhead projector. And my hands were shaking so much that it was impossible to read the words on the wall. And I don't know if you remember those projector sheets, but they weren't the easiest thing to deal with. And in my anxiety, a perfectly organized pile of 20+ sheets slid right off the desk onto the floor and hit the ground with a bomb in every direction. And I was so embarrassed, flustered, that I couldn't finish the presentation. In that moment, I needed Jesus, but instead, I believed a lie. The lie was that popular people were popular because they were bad. So I decided that I had to be bad to be popular. I spent the next few years becoming bad, which translated to experimenting with drugs at a very young age, and a full-blown drug habit before I even entered high school. I was always a smart kid. Always got good grades, always took accelerated courses, up until 8th grade, that is. When I can't imagine how an 8th grader could have struggled with Greek-calc, but I did big time. And there was one day when the teacher singled me out to answer a question that I had no idea how to answer. I can still remember his words when the answer I gave was completely wrong. He said, "Are you sure you're in the right class?" And looking back, it's obvious how awful and borderline abusive those words were. But in the moment, I took it for face value because that's what kids do. In that moment, I needed Jesus. But instead, I began to believe another lie. The lie was that I was too stupid to be successful, so I just gave up trying. These are just a couple of the many examples of times in my life that the father of lies deceived me. Throughout high school, things got much worse. Drug use grew and evolved to much more serious drugs. I got arrested for shoplifting. I got arrested for using drugs on school grounds. I spent time in rehab and counseling. Had periods of depression so deep that I contemplated suicide. I switched schools to get a new start, but lo and behold, there were drugs at my new school too. I almost didn't graduate high school. Go figure, it was a math class that almost kept me back. A few things did get better. I learned to play the guitar pretty well for a self-taught high school kid. I became very popular. I ended up in a serious relationship with the woman that I am now lucky enough to call my wife. I became the opposite of shy. In fact, looking back, I call it obnoxious. That even through all of this, the lies were still there. I had just learned to hide them so that nobody knew but me. It wasn't until halfway through college that anything really changed. A series of both internal and external events brought me to my knees on a cold day in December. I can't really explain what happened that day, but something finally clicked inside my head, inside my heart. The love and faith in Christ that my parents and church community here at St. Norbert's instilled in me, and the selfless, amazing love that they gave me as they stood by me through it all, finally got through. I know now that this was a moment of God's amazing grace. And in that moment, I acknowledged and began to believe two very important facts. First, I am good. I'm good because God created me in His image and in His likeness, and because He loves me. And second, if I had gone on living the way I was, I would have ended up dead, or worse. That day, I asked Jesus to come into my very darkest places and heal me. And He did. What began that day was healing within and a new way of thinking, a new way of seeing myself and of seeing God. Since that day, my life has been very different. I graduated college with a 3.3 GPA, double major, and a minor. I worked my way up for 5 years in a very difficult company before leaving to accept the job that I always wanted. I married the most beautiful and wonderful girl in the world, and we had the 3 most perfect boys that God ever created. And on December 12th, I celebrated 8 years completely sober from drugs and alcohol. Most importantly, though, I'd given my life completely and totally over to the Lord. And I desired nothing more than to glorify Him. I want to close with one last quick story. 1 year, almost to the day after my last sip of alcohol, I was faced with one of the most devastating tragedies of my life. One of my greatest role models, the reason that I picked up a guitar in the first place, died in a car accident. His name was Peter, and he was my hero. And in that moment, I needed Jesus. For the first time in my life, I didn't run away. I did not believe a lie. Instead, I ran into the arms of the Lord. And one of my favorite verses in Scriptures is Romans 8:28. And we know that all things work together for the good of those who love God and those who are called according to His purpose. And I can honestly say that I have never felt closer to the Lord, or to Peter for that matter, than I did in the days and months after he died. It was in that vulnerable time that I embraced my mission and accepted the challenge to live in God's truth, to change the world one moment at a time. Brothers and sisters, I have discovered that it often appears easier just to believe the lies about yourself and about life. It often appears easier just to run away. But I can say with complete confidence that it isn't. I can also say with complete confidence that the Pharisees in today's gospel were wrong about something. God does listen to sinners, and our God is a God who saves. Thank you.